Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to go back on an Ambassador. It's another version of the Ambassador line. This one is the Ambassador 7. It's got a funky little thing called a synchro drag on it. So this is the 7000, I believe it says C, it's kind of scraped up, synchro. And it's got a little adjuster kind of a thing here that we'll explain in a little bit. But I picked this one up at a flea market. It is a reel that's a little bit older. It's definitely been fished. You can see boat rash on the chrome pieces and parts. It probably hasn't been wiped off or cleaned up as much as it should. Has a good old character marks here with a lot of dings and paint loss, but that only means it's been used. A couple of scrapes here, but overall the reel is solid. It's working on the level wind, and that's what you want to do. If you're going out in a flea market and you're trying to purchase a reel, make sure all the pieces and parts are there, that you're not missing caps on either end, that all of the screws are in place, that the reel turns and works freely, and that tells you you've got a good thing to get started with. And after that you can tune it up and keep it working, because these reels are meant to last a long time. And there's no reason why they can't with the proper service. And if you have one of these, we'll show you how to service it today. And if you're always wondering about what makes these things go, then you'll learn about that as well. So we're going to start by taking off the handle side assembly here, and then we'll get underneath to the gears. Now we just have a little pressure cap on here. It's not held on by much, and it always surprises me these things don't pop off. But put a little there's a little indentation in the cap here. If you put a little screwdriver behind it, you'll get that off. Now before we go much further on this, one of the things you should look for if you don't know what the reel is go out to the internet. I went to Abu, their website, and I pulled the schematic for the Ambassador 7, and it shows me an exploded version of it. Now in this particular one it's the 7, but it doesn't have that synchro drag going underneath it there. So you'll see a little bit more of that when we work it. I couldn't find the 7 with the synchro, but that's okay. This is going to tell you the sequence that the parts belong in, and if you run into any trouble there, you're going to be able to work yourself out of it. And those of you that know the Ambassadors, here's an example of the difference between this and the other one. There's a lot more in terms of drag washers going on here. Okay, so let's we take that off, and next thing you're going to notice something a little funky here. And then what's funky is we have a nut onto the main shaft here that holds back the star adjuster nut. There's 2 clips in here. I imagine they make a special tool, kind of a fork tool that would enable you to do that. I don't have one of those. I'm going to see if we can do it with 1 screwdriver. If not, then what you would do is you would kind of just make your own tool by putting one in each slot and kind of turning like this. We got it going, so let's see if we can do it with the 1. Yeah, we can. I think we can. And that'll just back that nut off. So you should take pictures along the way, just so you know the sequence that you took these off. So use a digital camera, use your phone camera, use a video camera like I'm using here, whenever you're working on a reel. That way you'll know where the pieces and parts are and the sequence that you took them off in, just in case you get in trouble. Okay, this one has a collar on it. It's threaded. It has a rubber O-ring on the outside to keep some of the water off. All of those are important. Notice the orientation. You know that those slots go up top when you go to reinstall. You'll notice that I'm putting all my pieces and parts into a parts tray. That's so that when I go to reinstall, I know where they are. And also, it's just good practice so that if you finish what you think is my reinstall, and you look in your parts bin and you find something, then you know you got to go back and reset it. Okay, there's a C-clip on here now. Generally, these are just little pressure clips that you can push off without much effort. I got that one. I got lucky. It didn't fly. Be careful with that. That's the C-clip. That's going to go back onto the main shaft. I put that in my parts tray. And now we should be able to take off the star adjuster. Like I said, this is a little bit of a different drag system here. It's got a synchro, called a synchro lock on it. So be careful as you're taking these off what's going on. And I'm noticing that there's a shim washer inside of this. Just make sure that you have that shim washer set. Next off, you want to take that little screw off the holder there. That can come off. We got some dirt in here. We should have a series of washers. And you can pull up, if you want to be careful about this, pull up on your handle. These washers have to be cleaned, but notice the sequence that they're in. These things have taken a beating here. We're going to have to clean those up. They're tension washers. Then you just want to check underneath, and this is your fork. That's probably what the tool looks like actually on the other nut there, but this is the one that's going to control your drags down below here. That drag is very similar to a lever drag kind of a look and feel. Okay, well, before I go much further, I'm going to try and clean these washers off. There's a difference between clean tarnished and clean corroded. These just seem to be tarnished. And I'm using 4-0 steel wool on this. Get these cleaned up. And these are tension washers for the sensitivity of the star adjuster. And again, I'm trying to save these just because reordering them to make them look pretty, it's going to cost me time, and I'd like to get this reel out fishing. I bought this one just to give it a try. I haven't used one of these 7000s, so I'm more interested in just making sure that it's sound, that the drag systems are in good stead, that the reel is oiled and cleaned, and then we're going to go put it out on a pole and see how we do fishing. But if I was rebuilding, I would certainly consider replacing these little tension washers, just because it sort of shows that the folks that owned this previously didn't do a real good job there. But this, I'm getting the roughness off of these. They still maintain the bend. We're in good shape. Okay, so now we want to take the adjuster screws off of these. These usually can be done by hand after you break the that first cut there. Then you can spin them off, and these should be attached to the case. These shouldn't be coming out of the case. Pretty much easy enough. Once you feel the third one, you should be able to remove that case, which we have. And this is one solid heavy-duty reel. There's no question about it. This case seems to have the majority of the weight in it. Interestingly enough, I'm looking down on my table, and the first thing I see is one of those brakes from the spool. They always seem to shoot, so be careful. These are spool brakes. They control the spin rate on the spool, and you can run it without it. It'll spin more. The more brakes you have on, the more tension it's going to give you, the more control it's going to give you on the spin to stop the backlashes. But make sure that you have all of them there, and you can remove the spool to get at the other side. But this is a very well-made reel. Just looking at the characteristics of it here as I'm taking it apart. And I thought I would just going to put the 4 of those. We're just going to stand that up here. We don't lose those brakes again. And looking inside, what we normally see on this would be a plastic wheel, and what we have on this flywheel here is an aluminum wheel. Aluminum wheel, not wheel. And then we have our click mechanism here. So there's nothing that really needs to be done on this side other than clean it up. I'm just going to go use a cotton swab. Now if I notice that there was damage on any of these pieces and parts, if they needed a more thorough cleaning, I could pull the side plate here with this these 2 screws, 3 screws, and pull that. It doesn't appear that I need that. Maybe later, after I give it a field trial, I'll want to come back and clean this some more. You can clean up the side plates like this with the steel wool as well. Get some of that boat rash off there. You can do the same thing with the crossbars. But right now I'm more concerned about making sure that the reel is functional and can be fished rather than being cleaned. But I probably will go back at some point in time and make it pretty. Okay, we're going to take the side plate off now. I'm just going to check to make sure that the insides are cleaned, lubed, and that the drag washers are in good condition. Again, this sees more of the predator fish or the heavier fish at the ocean level, so it needs to be built more more solidly. Okay, we're going to pull those 2 screws. That'll enable us to pull the side plate off. We'll check underneath the side plate. Everything looks good under there. A little bit of overspray from painting and all. That's normal. Just making sure it's clean. We have a bearing here, so we're going to go ahead and flood that bearing. I'm using Real X oil to do that. I'm also going to take my Phillips head screwdriver right into the center of the bearing, make sure that it turns, which it does. Now we're at the business end of the reel. This one has some grease on it. We're going to just go ahead and pull the whole assembly off here so that we can clean up some of this dirtier stuff. That's the spool gear. That's going to go into the parts tray. I'm going to use a paper towel. You can use a couple of different things. Whatever you do, use something that's clean. When you go ahead and work with this type of stuff, you don't want to put anything that's contaminated back in. And then for the harder to reach spots, I use a cotton swab. Now, you don't have to, when the general servicing, you don't need to remove all of these, the mechanicals here. If you had to replace, then you could do things like if you had to replace the free spool assembly, this is a C-clip that would come off. There's a spring underneath it, and then this whole assembly can lift up. But quite honestly, don't go fooling around with the springs if you don't need to go fooling around with the springs. All right, I'm just going to hit this with a shot of WD-40 or the like. In this case, it just happens to be the hardware equivalent of it, just to help me get some of that additional grease over. WD-40 and their other penetrating oils are not lubricants. They're cleaners. They're rust inhibitors. They're drying agents, but they're not lubricants. So don't think you can come in here, spray this thing with WD-40 and you've lubricated your reel. You really haven't. As a matter of fact, it's good to get most of that stuff off if you can while you're doing the dishes, as I like to refer to it. That's what we've kind of done here. We've done the laundry, right? Okay. So that's done. I'm just going to grab a little bit of blue grease now. I use, in this case, I'm using a Penn Precision reel grease. I'm just going to go back and put some of the grease where you saw me taking the dried grease off of. Get the arm for the release. A little bit on the spool gear, free assembly holder. Folks ask why I use the screwdriver. It drives them nuts. So it's just habit. A lot of folks will use a little artist's brush or something. I've been doing it so long like this that's kind of what I do now. Okay, here's your main core assembly then. Underneath here we have the ratchet and the anti-reverse. We have a little bit of a different collar here. That's the one that's Syncro. It's going to be putting the pressure on it, almost like a lever drag kind of a reel. And then we have our anti-reverse mechanism. This is not an instant anti-reverse with an anti-reverse bearing. It's the old style fork. If you find that your anti-reverse isn't working properly, just pinch this a little bit. You don't need to pinch it a lot. It's a friction anti-reverse. You'll see how that works when we go put it back together. And then we're just going to try and pull these out. This may be where I need my little utility knife. But these are hard washers, carbon text, carbon. They don't need a. This is another reason why I use a board underneath. A lot of people have asked me about my board. I use that because it's better than banging it on something that's going to damage a piece. Okay, and then the last one is just sitting in here. And that one looks clean enough that I'm just going to probably leave it in there. Unless I can just pop it right here. Again, I don't want to damage something if I don't need to. No, I'm going to leave that. It's clean enough. But then I would be setting a poor example, wouldn't I? So let's get that out of there. We'll clean the channel. And this is a personal use reel I found for $25. I really want to see how it performs before I go and invest a lot of time and effort in it. Here's the rider for the anti-reverse. This is going to ride on here. Just make sure all of that is clean. Just trying to remember which way it goes. It goes that way. So that's how your anti-reverse is going to work. This is the two knuckles on the reel that is going to trip the free spool release back. Those two spools knuckles are going to sit in those grooves here on the mechanism. So let's just go back and put this together and make sure it reinstalls properly. This lays down over. And again, this is where videos help you. Didn't get that on. The videos will help you to determine how the sequences go. There we go. Okay, now we're going to put the main gear back on. And as you noticed, I laid these out in the sequence that they are. Again, these are hard fiber washers. You don't need to do anything with them. Make sure that the metal washers are clear of dirt and debris. The top washer here is the eared washer, which fits in the grooves of the main drag. One here, top one here. Then I'm just going to press in on this to make sure that this works and that it fires when I turn. And it does. We heard the trip on that. And I don't have the case on, so it keeps pushing this anti-reverse back, but there we go. Now we can put the case back on after we put the spool gear in. We should have put that on first. Just pull that off again. Spool gear sits with the crown side out. That's what's going to grab the spool. So it's going to ride like that. And I'm just going to, while I have this off, I probably should have done it earlier, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the main gear itself. And as it rotates, it will work its way into all of the teeth there to the extent that it's needed. Okay, we can go put this back on then. The main cap back on. Reinstall the cap. Now at this point, I guess we can continue to do some cleaning. This is a general degreaser. It's called Purple Power. It's available in automotive stores. I find that it works very well. You don't need a lot of it. It is concentrated. But it works a lot of miracles here and things like fish scales and built up grime and the like. So if you're cleaning your reel, and again, I'm probably going to go back and do a nice job of cleaning this one up. But for the purposes of this, it's more about what's this reel made out of, how to repair it, and how to put it back together to go fishing again. So I'm kind of skipping those steps for this video. And again, it's mine, it's not a customer's, so we're just going to lay it out there for now. Okay, we can then set the main piece on. Next up will be the two side plate screws. Nice heavy duty reel, nice series set of drags for ocean fishing or heavy duty fishing. as opposed to using it for a bass reel, for example, or an inshore reel for like summer flounder or some of the smaller fish. This one's built to take a beating. You can tell from the reel itself. Nice componentry to it. Nice setup. Okay, next up then would be there's a sink guard on this one now. So the handle here, again, this has got some crusty old dirt and junk on it. So let's go clean that up. And again, this handle took a beating. I guess if I was trying to do something to make this thing pretty, you could probably repaint it or do something like that. Again, to me it's more about the functionality of it than it is the cosmetics of it. But that's kind of up to the user, right? Alright, we're going to just make sure that seats properly. Then there's a little clip here that goes on the back of this. That little click is, I believe it's going to just make a click noise on the adjuster. Just kind of following backwards what we were doing on the other side. Okay, next in then is those adjuster shims that we were cleaning up there. Then we can set the star adjuster in. And just work it in by hand. You want to make sure that you get the little washer there aligned with the rectangle, and you also want to make sure that the set is coming inside of the synchro loop. And we can take our little C-clip, just following the process backwards. It's the inverse of the way you took it off, which is why it's important to have your pictures there, so that if you get lost along the way, you go back to sequencing the pictures and determine what came first. We use a little needle nose pliers on that E-clip. You're always got to be careful with these. You don't want them to shoot. Okay, that's on. Now that funky little watertight seal is going to hold that in. Again, you want to make sure you can do it by hand as much as you can. And then this one had that little groove. Again, I'm sure that there's probably a tool out there, but if we're only doing it once, 2 screwdrivers will do. In this case, this is simple enough that you don't need the 2. And just that pressure cap now is it. So that's it. And we'll just give it a test drive now. This is to target some bottom fishing here in New Jersey. Bluefish maybe, maybe summer flounder, possibly striped bass in the fall. So we'll see how it goes. But the reel overall is a nice reel, cosmetics aside. Obviously it's a well-made reel. We saw that as we took it apart. Obviously it's easy to spin and turn, which means that the mechanicals behind this thing is just spot on. And I'm excited to find out how it does under load. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have an Ambassadeur 7, you now know how to tune it up. If you find one at a flea market and you're thinking of buying one, now you know what it's made of and how the mechanicals work inside of it. And overall, this one, I think for $25 is a great bargain. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. Tell your fishing buddies to subscribe as well, as I'm trying to increase my base channel viewership. If you like it, please indicate that as well. And I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.